In this episode of the Awaken Podcast, we're going to show you what you can do to stop abandoning yourself. Many of us have unknowingly been living in codependent patterns, abandoning our own needs and prioritizing the needs and emotions of our loved ones, as well as the greater world. We've become lost, disconnected from how we truly feel and what we truly want to create and experience in our lives. And in order for us to break that cycle, we first need to deeply understand it and then learn some practical tools to begin implementing change and setting ourselves free. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's going to be a fun, real, and at times probably a little uncomfortable conversation, but it's a necessary one. You deserve to feel free, to know what you want to be in your life, and we're here to show you how. Welcome to the Awaken Podcast,
where we share practical spirituality for modern living.
Join us as we dive deep into conversations about healing and transformation.
Let's go. Cheers.
Here we are, ready to dive into a really important conversation about the ways that we abandon ourselves and how we can stop doing that.
Yeah, and I know this conversation may be triggering for a lot of people tuning in. So this is a disclaimer. If you find yourself triggered throughout this podcast, please come back to your breath. Know that your breath is your resource. You can breathe nice and slowly and just remind your mind and body that you're safe, because when we're speaking into these patterns, often things come up.
Yes, I know they did for me. And I'll add to that, let's be kind to ourselves. So let's set an intention and take a breath together.
Yeah. My intention for today is to highlight some patterns that may be keeping people from being connected to their true, authentic power.
Yeah, my intention is to share the words that my past self would have really benefited from hearing, because I know there are others out there who are going through it, and codependency and self-abandonment is a world where there's so much suffering. So I hope that this will find those who need it and help set them free.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that may happen throughout this conversation is people tuning in may not have realized that they have codependent relationships or that they've been abandoning themselves. And as they start to listen and reflect, they might start to notice, damn, I do that. I can relate to that.
That was me. So I suppose this is a good place for us to start in talking about what this looks like, how it can show up, some of our personal experiences with self-abandonment and how we realized codependency was the thing for us.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to speak into is something that we've spoken about many times before, but it's really helpful to understand it from this perspective, which is the Fawn response, which is a stress response, an adaptive strategy that we've learned to keep ourselves safe, which can manifest as abandoning our own selves to please others, putting other people first at the detriment of our own needs and desires. We abandon ourselves in the process, and it's very common.
Yes. And it just lives in the unconscious most of the time until you decide to make it conscious. And so for me, I remember I had heard about the book Codependent No More by, I think it's Melody Beattie, and I saw it. It sparked my curiosity. It felt a bit heavy and like, oh, maybe I don't need that. But it did stir something up in me, as things tend to when my intuition is guiding me. And eventually I decided to read the book. And it was a really, really uncomfortable process to begin to learn about codependency. And I started to see it playing out in real time as I was reading a book. I mean, that's the beauty of reading, is you're reading usually for a week or a few weeks, the same material. And so it has its chance to work its way into your life and reveal itself.
Starts to highlight patterns that were
Exactly.
once unconscious, then you're shining light on them and making them conscious. And the
Yeah.
empowering part of that is, even though it's uncomfortable, that's how we create change.
And as I was reading this book, I started to witness specifically moments in my life, in the day-to-day things that I thought were normal, that I usually just do automatically. And there would be these moments where I would say yes when deep down inside I would have preferred to have said no. And I would notice myself compromising on my priorities, my values, my plans for the day, and things subtly and gradually derailing from what I was wanting and needing, because I was allowing other people's needs and emotions and preferences to drive my decisions and how I expressed myself or chose not to express myself.
Yeah, this is where the conversation gets a little bit tricky, because sometimes we have to do that because we don't have another choice. Because a lot of these coping strategies start in our early developmental years. And during that time, we didn't know any better. That was all we knew. And as we grow up and we keep using these strategies, sometimes you don't have a choice because it's all you've ever known. And I think about the parents out there that have to constantly abandon themselves to look after their newborn babies. Like, they have to put their babies first.
Not just the newborns too. It's happening for years on end for many parents,
Yeah.
where they feel as though they're having to put themselves last.
So there's many situations where we may not have a choice, but there's other situations where we do have a choice. And there is,
Everyone has a choice, but let's be real. The alternative is not feasible. Like, no one wants to choose to ignore their kid or not make their partner feel important or be totally numb to the needs of other people. Nobody wants to do that, even though we technically could.
yeah.
There is a higher level of knowing within all of us that says, okay, even though I don't really want to do this, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and sometimes the fawn response can work for us and it can serve us. And
It's a valid survival strategy.
And then sometimes it's just no longer working for us. So that would be your example of noticing that you're saying yes to things that deep inside feel like a no. And as we say yes, 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 when really it's a no, 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 then what happens over time is we're abandoning ourselves, and that causes resentment to build. It causes a misalignment. We feel like we kind of lose ourselves in that process.
Yeah, as you said, it starts usually in childhood. And I can say for me, it definitely did. And I know for you, there's signs from childhood. And for most of our clients who we work with on codependency and self-abandonment, there are signs of it really early on in life. And it can show up in relationships with family members, whether that be
Especially with family members.
right. And it doesn't just have to be parents. It could be with your grandparents. It could be with siblings. There's many different ways that it can start to develop. And usually there are certain dynamics within our lives where we no longer feel safe to be our authentic selves, or we take on more responsibility than is healthy for us.
Yeah.
So
that's a big one.
that comes up a lot for people with becoming the caretaker,
Yep.
the fixer, the problem solver in the family.
Yeah, and you see people who have developed those patterns usually go out in the world, and a lot of people create careers around that, where they become nurses or doctors or therapists or people working in the therapeutic space of, supporting people.
Absolutely. So common. People don't realize that what got them into the work is actually this identity that they've taken on as the caretaker fixer that is ultimately super codependent.
Yeah, so there can be a lot of beauty in it. I guess what we're really here to talk about today is where it might be holding you back in life. That's where the juicy conversation is. And that's where things can get a little bit triggering.
Yeah.
I can start off with a real life example of how I've seen it show up in my life. And I see this with a lot of people who have lost parents at an early age, or they've gone through a significant trauma. So, when you lose a parent and then you see another parent struggling, and especially if you're an empath and you know the pain that your other parent that's still alive is feeling. So you may seek to modify your behavior, and in doing that, you could abandon your own needs and desires, be a space holder for them, or just modify your behavior in a way that's not truly authentic to you in the moment. And in doing that, you lose yourself. You kind of merge with the other person's experience, and you don't feel connected to your own needs and desires. So I remember that growing up, and I've supported so many clients with that process, and it might not be around losing a parent or a trauma. It might be growing up with a parent or a caregiver that had a really big energy, and you felt that you couldn't take up space, or maybe you weren't able to speak up about things. Maybe you were punished when you used your voice to speak up. So you learned over time that it wasn't safe to speak your truth, or when I do speak up, I get punished. So I'm not going to use my voice. I'm not going to speak my truth, which then leads into the fawn response.
Exactly. One thing that I want to clarify here as you're listening to this conversation, we're not here to say that if you identify with any of these experiences that you are labeled as codependent. There is such a broad spectrum of how this can show up, and it can be every now and then something that you go to when you feel stressed, in the case of the fawning response, which is a valid way to cope with stress when it calls for it, as we've said. And then there are more extreme cases that develop into self-abandonment all the way from childhood up into adult life. And then it can show up specifically as codependent dynamics. So there's a broad spectrum here. Take what resonates and leave the rest.
Yeah. Well, for me also, it came from a place of fear, right? Because I had already lost a parent and I didn't want to lose another parent. So the mind will often go to worst case scenarios. And then as a kid, you might try to problem solve or think about, what can I do to stop that from happening? Like you said, you take on extra responsibility, and that can become a burden. If you think that you have to manage and hold space for people as a kid, and the parent doesn't know that you're necessarily navigating this because it's an internal process. They don't know that you're abandoning your own needs and desires. They don't know that you're modifying your behavior. They have no idea.
And they might even frame it as, oh, you're such a good kid, or okay, you're getting it and you're responding to what we're going through as a family in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
You're showing empathy, you're showing understanding, you're adapting. And yeah, it is adapting, but it can have long-term kind of damaging effects.
Let's speak into that. So where does it not serve us? You spoke about saying yes when really inside it was a no, which I think a lot of people can relate to. But let's go deeper into the nuances of how it manifests.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do just want to say that a lot of people that we've worked with also have experience with developing self-abandonment type behaviors and codependency, who have been in families where there's been abuse, drug addiction, alcoholism, depression and anxiety. For example, we've had many clients who have described having parents with severe depression or anxiety and being highly empathic and not knowing how to be with the parents' mood swings or really low states.
Yeah.
And then taking on the role of the space holder and the caregiver or the nurturer or the quiet kid that isn't any trouble. And these are ways that it can begin. And then you fast forward into adult life and you find yourself in friendships and work relationships and romantic relationships, and these same unconscious behaviors, because this is a key point, you learn it and it becomes a part of the way that your brain and body work. It's wired into the nervous system.
It becomes a part of your identity.
And so then you don't even know that it's there. It's like a fish in water. It's just who you know yourself to be and how you know how to relate to others and operate in the world. So then you find yourself in relationships, and some of the things that you do, you may think are the right thing to do or are completely normal. But other people aren't doing those things necessarily. And that may be how it starts to reveal itself to you, where you're like, how come I always prioritize, let's say, what my partner wants? Or I am always working harder than everyone else because I feel obligated to. Or as an empath, this is such a common one. How come whenever I'm around my friends and they're stressed or going through something, we don't talk about me at all?
Yeah, that's big.
I'm just listening and kind of playing the role of the counselor and the space holder to make sure that they feel okay.
Yeah.
And when they ask how I'm doing, I actually kind of automatically deflect and go, oh, don't worry about me, or I keep it really brief and flip it straight back to them.
Yeah. There can also be this aspect of losing yourself in relationships completely.
And it can become familiar and comfortable there.
Totally.
To be disconnected from yourself or to not have the spotlight on you, right?
Yeah. I look at like if people were dating, right? And they're having sex and they don't have the ability to speak into their own desires and what they want. Like they shut themselves down, they shut their voice down, and they just go along with what the other person wants.
Whatever you like, whatever you're into.
Yeah. Yep. So it's not having a preference, being easygoing, go with the flow, but in recognizing that you're doing that, it's not authentic to you. So that's what we're speaking into, because it's great to go with the flow. But if you are doing it from a place of not being connected to yourself, not being authentic with your true desires, and abandoning yourself in the process, this is where it becomes problematic.
Exactly. And I think it will start to rear its head more as you develop closer relationships. I mean, we all know what it's like, you know, when you develop a really good friendship and you go through some trials and tribulations and the true colors start to come out. Like maybe you have your first fight or you have some difficulties, and then the friendship does get more raw and real. And it's the same with romantic partnerships and family, of course. As you get more and more comfortable with each other, you also get more raw and real. And at that point, it may start to grind your gears that you're self-sacrificing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is where the conversation also leads into shadow work, because we have to realize that we're doing this to ourselves. We're disconnected from our own authentic power. We're giving our power away in that moment to what that person wants. And this could show up, you know, like we've said, not being able to speak your truth, not speaking up about how you're truly feeling and what you need. You just shut down your voice. It could manifest in so many different ways, which we'll speak into soon. But there's this felt sense of resentment that's building towards the other person or towards the situation in life or whatever it is that you're giving your power away to.
Yeah. I've seen as well a really common thing that starts to happen is there will be the resentment that builds, and then there's the desire for things to be different, and there will be an attempt to break out of the self-abandoning behavior and to put yourself first or assert what you want. But then there's a guilt hangover that usually comes with it in the initial stages.
This is the shadow work aspect, right?
Yeah,
the parts of ourselves that we reject and abandon.
And where you assert yourself and you set a boundary, and instead of being like, I'm so proud of myself that I did that and I feel really good about that, you go, was that okay? Was I bad? Was that the wrong thing? Oh, I'm sorry. You may even completely undo the work that you've done to assert yourself and be authentic.
Yeah.
Because it feels too foreign and vulnerable to be doing you.
Yeah, we hear that from parents all the time, right? Where they like spend time away from their children and then feel guilty about that. They feel guilty about, you know, having a few hours to themselves or a day to themselves even, putting themselves first. You know, that guilt kicks in.
Yeah, another common way that this shows up that I've seen is people who in their adult lives have very codependent relationships with their parents where they guilt trip each other and it's a loop. So this is where we go from like a one-sided kind of self-abandonment issue where it's like, why are you being a people pleaser? No one asked you to do that. No one has asked you to not do what you want to do.
That's on you.
And then the next level is these relationships where actually, no, the person is straight up guilt tripping you and you're buying into it. Yep. And then you may do it back in a different type of way.
Yep.
And you keep in this cycle of manipulation, appeasement, and it's back and forth, back and forth. It's tit for tat. It's, I did this for you, so you should do this for me. It's, if you're a good friend, you would do this. If you're a good daughter, mother, son, wife, husband, brother, sister, client, whatever, these expectations and being motivated by guilt and shame that can be really harmful for people, and you got to nip it in the bud, baby.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
That's huge. Looking at the areas of your life that might be motivated by guilt, by shame, and by fear. And usually what comes with that is a dynamic of enabling the other person. Like you're enabling them, and some part of you believes that they're not going to be okay if you don't do that. Like if you stand up for what you want, or if you put yourself first, you feel that that other person is not going to be okay. You limit their ability to connect to their authentic power, and you enable behaviors that are not fully in alignment with their sovereignty, with their autonomy. It's like we get too immersed and tangled together, in our relationships, which then can become unhealthy and toxic.
The enabling thing is so interesting. And again, I think a lot of people don't realize that they're doing it. It can happen in so many different dynamics, but one way that it for sure I've seen it show up for so many of our clients is enabling people by financially supporting them more than is appropriate. Like for example, if someone always needs to be bailed out of things.
That comes with coping mechanisms and addictions too.
Yeah, for sure.
I think about all the parents that have children out there suffering with addiction, and there's this real fear. Like if I don't bail them out, what's going to happen? They're not going to be okay.
Exactly. And then the other part of it too is doing things for people rather than helping them to do things for themselves. I mean, I know I've had this with you as well, where we don't have a super traditional relationship. And I think that's one of the things that we both really enjoy is that we encourage each other to be independent and to figure things out for ourselves. So I'm not the kind of partner that does those traditional wifey things for you a lot of the time. Like I don't make you food. I'm not busy in the kitchen. I don't do all the cleaning. We both do our own washing and cleaning, and we split the duties, and it feels really good that way. But being in an identity of I have to do this as a woman or I should do this. I'm not saying that it's wrong if you want to do that. If that feels good for you and it's authentic, do you.
That's the key.
That is the key. If it works for you, stick with it. For me, it did not feel authentic or inspiring to play that role. And so from the beginning, I think you and I both were in agreement that we didn't want that type of relationship, and we more wanted to be on like our boss journey together and co-create as allies. But there have been things for both of us where we would rely on each other, and some of those things we still do, and it works. It's like, you know your roles, I know my roles, I know what I'm good at, you know what you're good at. We stick with those things. But there are other things where it's like, I don't want to do that for you. And me doing this for you is enabling things that don't feel healthy or long-term sustainable. And so I have to take responsibility and speak up if I'm not happy to do something and let you know so that you can find another way. And I think it's that old saying of give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. If there's certain things that people rely on you for that drain your energy, then maybe the solution is to support them, point them in the right direction, or even take a little time to teach them so that they don't need you.
And check in. Are you really empowering that person, or are you enabling them? Because if you are enabling them, then that's not leading them to be in their own personal power and alignment with their sovereignty. So we need to check that. One of the things that you mentioned was how this pattern has showed up in our relationship. And I want to speak into like the past, because I know in relationships, you can lose yourself. And I know many people relate to that, right? When you're by yourself, when you're single, you're doing your thing, you feel good, you're empowered.
You feel in control.
Yeah. And then
you're in the driver's seat.
Exactly. Then when you get into a relationship, there can be a tendency for a lot of people to lose themselves in the relationship. And I know both you and me have experienced this. And one way it's manifested is our eating choices, where instead of thinking about what I would want to eat or what you would want to eat, we just eat whatever the other person wants to eat. We don't even think about our own needs and desires and our own goals and what we're trying to accomplish. We just go along with the program.
That was such a huge one, even to the point where you would offer me food because you were eating and you were hungry. And even though I wasn't hungry, in the desire for connection, I would abandon my own physiological signals and be like, okay.
Same. How many people can relate to that? You're not even hungry, but you're like, yeah, sure.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Join the party.
Yeah. And that's fine if that works for you. But if it's something that doesn't work for you, like I know for us, we got really frustrated with that because we recognized that that was slowing us down or stopping us from getting the results that we wanted on our health and fitness journey, and that we recognized that we had to take responsibility for what we personally put into our bodies and not blame the other person. Like,
That's
for
key.
example, if I said that I'm not going to have any like cookies or treats and you brought cookies or treats into the house, then I have to be in control of my own actions. I can't just eat the cookies and then blame you for bringing them into the house. And I saw that would manifest, right? Like in our relationship with food, which was so interesting. There was a point in your journey where you blamed me for your food choices. And there was a point in my journey where I blamed you. And then we recognized, hold on a minute, we're not actually in our power. We need to take responsibility for our own choices.
For sure.
And food is just a funny way that it can show up, but it's so much bigger than that, right?
It could also be alcohol. I think for some people, they don't want to drink and their partner's drinking, and so they will drink.
Yep.
It could be in friend groups. I know for quite a while, my friends were into smoking weed and I wasn't at all, or going out when I was getting kind of tired of going out and wanted to do other things. And so we can abandon ourselves until we're ready to assert our own needs, preferences, and truth. And like you said, it is about taking responsibility and recognizing that blaming isn't really serving you or addressing the root cause of the problem, the issue, the challenge. It's with you. You are the one who needs to connect to yourself and then take the next appropriate steps forward to live authentically. The other thing that I find can come up here, as you start to awaken, if you like, to the unconscious behavior, is the pendulum can swing really far from one way to the other. Yeah. So you can go from being a total people pleaser or being like, whatever you think, whatever you want, sure, let's do it, I don't know, all the way to you are the reason that I'm not making progress. Like you were saying about the blaming.
Yeah, you can get defensive, reactive, you can get quite aggressive, you can want to push people away to create space, because when you're not in your own personal power and you're not used to taking up space and using your voice to speak your truth, and you're just starting to try that on as a possibility, there can be this part of you that, because it's not natural, then you have to kind of assert yourself in an unhealthy way at first, because that's just all you know how to do, because it's not natural for you.
And sometimes it can feel easier to push someone away than to sit in the discomfort of setting a boundary to their face. And I've seen that in our relationship, where there have been times in the past where I've been like, maybe it's just easier for me to do this on my own. Maybe if we weren't together. We've joked about it as well and talked about it, how we're like, maybe if we weren't together, we'd just level up in these ways where we can kind of distract each other and hold each other back. And what you realize then and there is that that's kind of a Band-Aid, because the root is I need to learn to be with myself, grounded in my own body with another person.
Yeah.
And this is where we get to the deeper work of, wow, in my childhood, how did I learn that it wasn't safe to just be with me, with another person, and to co-regulate and feel safe there? Where did I feel like the other person was not attuned to my needs, and so I had to dip out of my own body, abandon myself, and the only way to experience peace was to be over here with the other person.
Yeah, that's really common for empaths and HSPs. You know, we lose ourselves in the experience of the external world, especially in relationship with others. And it's a big thing. You know, I think about speaking into the fears of what happens when we reclaim our power from the places we lost it, you know, because there is a real program of fear there for a lot of people. Like if they have these relationships that go with the flow and they're easy and, you know, they're based on saying yes, yes, yes all the time, and they're based on the person abandoning themselves, and they're recognizing or becoming aware of this pattern, and it's no longer feeling good. So they speak up, they assert themselves, they create healthy boundaries, they take up more space, then that changes the dynamic of the relationship. And if the other person isn't willing to grow, then that might mean walking away from that relationship. There can be very real costs when we step into our power, you know, and we assert ourselves.
It's true that there are many relationships that are built upon unspoken agreements of someone being submissive, abandoning themselves to meet the needs of the other. And when that starts to change, what can happen is the other person will start to say, you've changed and I don't like it.
Yeah. Or they might say, you're changing. I like it. I'm going to change with you too. Let's level up together. You know, it can go in any direction. But the ego, which we spoke about in our last podcast, has a tendency when it's unhealthy to be resistant to change. And that can show up heavily in relationships.
One thing that I want to touch on here is the way we can get confused between codependency and self-abandonment versus loyalty. Because something that I have seen within myself and so many clients is that certain codependent traits or people-pleasing behaviors, we think we like it and we think that we're happy with it.
Well, there's some secondary gains there too, because you like to be wanted and you like to be needed.
We may derive our sense of worth from being that way.
Yeah. We get energy from it.
We feel useful.
Yeah.
So to look at that and go, do I only feel useful when I'm playing this role for this person in this particular relationship?
And is it one way?
Or is it my truth? There may be perks and benefits in that relationship. You know, you could be like, no, it's not one way. Like they do things for me and I do things for them. That's definitely been the case with us in the past, where we're like, we can be as codependent as each other. And so then we're like, no, that's just how we work. Like we help each other. I need you for this, you need me for that. But it's not the highest expression of ourselves. And that's different to loyalty. That's the point that I want to really land here, is needing to be needed and needing to prove your love by abandoning yourself or showing that you care based on an underlying feeling of guilt or shame, that if you don't do these things, the person's going to feel bad about themselves or change the way they are toward you. That's not the most high. And that's different to loyalty.
Yeah.
That's taking loyalty too far.
Yeah, loyalty is not enabling another person with their self-destructive ways.
Or abandoning yourself, because that's not an authentic type of love.
Yeah.
You should be able to be your authentic self and be in your authentic expression of care and not need to take it that far. I think that's going to an unreasonable length in order to earn love.
Okay, let's talk about this. So for the listener, you notice now from this conversation, maybe areas that you've been abandoning yourself, and you might be in these codependent dynamics in a certain area of your life. Maybe that serves you, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't serve you, let's talk about how we can start to create a shift.
I feel that the best way that we can begin the shift is by, one, listening to podcasts like this and actually learning about how to spot the signs of self-abandonment or codependency, and then noticing in your day-to-day life what you want, what you prefer, and how connected you feel to your inner self, meaning your own emotions, your own thoughts, and your own physical sensations in your own body, especially when you're around other people.
Yeah. So becoming more connected to yourself, your own needs and desires, and what you want is a key. Because when we abandon ourselves over and over again, we might not even realize what we want. We're kind of disconnected from our own bodies and needs and desires. So I think shining the light on that and just getting curious is the first place.
And from there, I think there's an opportunity to practice compassion rather than judgment. Because in that moment when we catch ourselves going, wait, why did I just put you first when I actually wanted to do something else? We could go into self-judgment, or we could go into blaming and judging the other. And instead, there's an opportunity here for compassion to go, oh, wow, I just noticed that. And why did I do that? What was I wanting? Because like you said with the secondary gain, we're wanting something when we do that. And for me, what I realized was that a lot of the time I was wanting connection.
For a lot of people, it didn't feel safe to put themselves first, right?
It can also be, I want to prove that I'm a good person, or I want to protect the other person because I'm afraid and I'm worried. And if I don't take control, then it might all turn really sour. Yeah,
that's a big one. That's huge. For me, when I notice that I've gone into the fawn response, it's usually after I've done it. So I've been in the automatic program, and then it's either during or after I reflect, hold on a minute, my true desire is that didn't feel good for me and I don't want that. But now that I'm aware of that, it's like it's almost too late to say it because I've already said the other thing. Like in your example of saying yes to something, I've already agreed to go to the dinner party, let's say. But now I'm recognizing I don't want to go.
Right. Like you said yes because you felt obligated to.
Yeah.
And you wanted to be a good person, but really you don't want to go to the dinner.
Or maybe there was a little bit of excitement there. Like maybe there was a part of me that wanted to go in that moment. But then when I connect to my true self, I'm like, nah, those people don't inspire me.
Or I just don't feel like it. Or I need something else right now.
Totally. It's like being willing to sit with that and then let that aspect of you lead, which is uncomfortable, right? Because it means you're going to have to speak up for yourself. It means you're going to have to use your voice. It means that you're going to have to be true to you.
So what might that look like for you?
It might mean offending people. It might mean letting people down. It might mean being the villain in someone else's story.
For me, this has happened a lot. And I have learned that when I derail from my authentic self, I have to clean it up, and I have to be willing to be uncomfortable later because I wasn't willing to be uncomfortable at the outset. And so I've given myself permission to change my mind. And I want to encourage the listeners to make friends with that too.
Yeah.
You can change your mind. It's okay to go, hey, I know I said that I wanted to get food with you, but I'm actually not hungry. Or I know I said that I could make it to that lunch, but I actually can't. Or I know I said I could help you move house, but I'm actually not going to be able to do that. It's okay to reassess and pivot.
Yeah, and I think the benefits of this is stepping into your power. So this is where you get to make choices from a place of personal empowerment. And when you do that, life gets really good because you feel in alignment with your inner being. You feel in alignment with your true self. And living from that place and making decisions from that place and taking aligned action from that place, life becomes miraculous because we're opening up into a space of co-creating what we truly want from an authentic place from within.
Okay, so what would you say to a listener who's like, well, it's easy for you to say that, but if I just change my plans and tell this person that I don't want to do this thing, then I'm going to be perceived as flaky and I could potentially ruin a friendship.
Yeah, well, what I would say is there's going to be this uncomfortable period. You have to get clear with what you want and be more connected to yourself. And if you're not, then that's on you. So if you've said one thing and now you want to do a different thing, that might be a case of like, I have to stick to my word. I have to honor my word because that's what I said. And if you are recognizing that that's not serving you, then you have to take responsibility for that, right? You have to actually question what you want. So instead of just saying yes to something, you could say, oh, awesome, I'll feel into that. You could say, let me get back to you in a day or so. Like you don't have to say yes straight away and you don't have to abandon yourself in the moment. You can think about things, you can feel into things, but if you commit to something, then it's good to stick to your word. And if you have to change your mind for whatever reason, you have to change your mind. But if that becomes a pattern where you're constantly not sticking to your word because you have a lack of connection to yourself and what you truly desire, then you need to work on that.
I think what you just touched on about trying to catch it earlier is the real key there. Because like you said, if it's becoming a pattern, then it's showing you that you're catching it too late. I know for me, I've learned that giving myself at least 24 hours to make decisions really helps. And I did learn that through human design because we have in our human design, for everyone listening, an authority, and that can help you with your decision making. And look, it's not going to be helpful with everything, but I know for me as an emotional authority, I can get caught up in the excitement of an invitation and then 6 hours later, I'm in a different emotion and I'm like, that makes no sense. I shouldn't be doing that. That was a bad idea. And so now I've learned, okay, just give it time and say, like you said, I'll get back to you. And then the other part of this that I think is important is with the human design, there are other authority types that can make decisions more spur of the moment and instinctively. But if you have fawning and people-pleasing tendencies, then you may be disconnected from those signals within your own body. And so there may be work there required in order for you to sort of clear the filters.
Yeah.
So you got to understand that. And then I think the other nugget that I would share on changing your mind and being like, well, okay, easy for you to say, but that's going to turn into a problem. I have reminded myself in many different situations of this and had to coach myself through it. You will survive. And when we are in fear and we're in those survival fawning responses, we're trying to protect ourselves from a perceived threat. And the nervous system can really go into catastrophizing the outcomes. I'm not saying that it's always minor. Sometimes there are very serious consequences that we do need to look at with eyes wide open, lucid and clear. But a lot of the time, you can totally survive facing someone being disappointed in you or a little let down or having a bit of FOMO, losing out on an opportunity. And what you'll gain in return is alignment. And I'll tell you that when I'm not in alignment and when I'm going, oh, well, I said I would, so I'm going to drag myself there and go and do the thing, I wake up and I feel like I do not like my life.
Yeah, and you're also sending mixed signals to the universe.
So clean it up and you get back in alignment and you feel like you're in the driver's seat of your own reality again and the burden lifts.
Yeah, and that's where you can start manifesting what you truly want.
Exactly.
Because if you're sending clear signals to the universe, knowing that we live in an attraction-based universe, then you're kind of slowing down or stopping what you truly want, right? Because you're not clear, you're not in the driver's seat, you're wishy-washy, you're neither here, you're there, you're not really connected to yourself.
Remember too, as we share this, that you do not have to go to extremes and be in that pendulum swing of all or nothing. Like I'm fully abandoning myself, or I'm being fully selfish and giving zero care to what other people feel or think. There is a sweet spot in between where you are dialed in on what you need. You're aware of what's going on. You can be kind, you can be respectful, and you can politely navigate your way through the world in a way where you're respecting your own path.
Yeah.
And you're doing you.
Yeah. Well, when you're filling up your own cup first and it's overflowing, then you have so much more to give to the world. You have so much more to give to your friends, to your family, to the people around you, and it's authentic. When your cup is drained and you're not taking care of yourself and you're not putting yourself first and you're serving from that place, then that doesn't just negatively impact you. It does impact the people around you because it's not authentic. And there's this other part of you that feels dissonant or unaligned in that process. And that's where we get into, like you said, not liking your life, not feeling like you are where you want to be, feeling like something's wrong, right? And that's not a good place to be. But we have to recognize that we hold the key to set ourselves free. We literally have the power to shift that behavior in the moment. And like you said, by recognizing that a lot of these threats aren't real, like you're going to survive disappointing someone. Like you said, you're going to survive letting someone down. If someone's not okay with you speaking up and sharing your truth, then that's on them.
Let's be real. Not everyone is vibrating there.
Yeah.
Some people actually get energy from bringing others down and making their problems other people's problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we got to set boundaries.
Yeah. That brings into the conversation this idea of worthiness. You're worthy of more. You're deserving of more. More is available to you right now. But you have to be the one to let it in. You have to be the one to try it on.
And raise your standards.
And yes, it may be uncomfortable at first, right? As we're stepping outside of the comfort zone of our known familiar reality, then we have to face off with that feeling of things being uncomfortable. But like you said, you're going to survive the process of growing into who you came here to be.
The interesting thing about this is that I can think of so many public figures, leaders, mentors, it goes across all categories, where there are people who have chosen to just be unfiltered and authentic. And the thing about it is if you disclose yourself and you have an integrated shadow, then it's much more difficult for people to take you off whatever imaginary pedestal they've created because you've done it first.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not the saint or this guru or this perfect figure that you're trying to pin me to be. And I have never implied that I was.
Exactly.
So whatever BS you want to project at me is not welcome or relevant because I've already been honest about who I am.
Yeah, that's on them.
Okay. As we prepare to wrap up this episode, I just want to pivot slightly and talk a bit about the freedom and the benefits that come with knowing yourself and being able to have your own back. And I love a little story time, so maybe we could share a nugget each about what's opened up for us as we've learned to assert ourselves more and lead from within.
I love that.
I think it has opened up a whole new world of self-love for me and appreciation for my unique ideas and way of being in the world. And I think when I was living as a chameleon and always putting other people's needs and preferences first, I didn't really know who I was. And so I actually found it really hard to love and appreciate myself and to have self-respect. So this leadership that I've accessed from within has also brought with it like, oh, I like me. I'm enjoying being more me. And contrary to what my past self would have believed, it's actually made all of my relationships better. Has there been loss along the way of some relationships? Yes, but to be completely honest, the relationships that have changed or faded away or I've lost along the way weren't meant to stay. And I feel completely fine about what has changed because now there's a standard of alignment and I have this expectation or agreement with myself and the people in my life that there's mutual respect. And that is the bare minimum requirement, right? I will love and respect you and allow you space to do you. And in return, I also would like that freedom. And I'm going to give myself that freedom. And if that has generated a problem, then we need to look at it so that we can keep creating a world where growth is possible and there's space to be free and authentic and real and well. So
Thriving.
Yeah, huge. It's been life-changing. And interestingly, along with that, as a highly sensitive person who was heavily carrying the pain and burdens of other people, I've experienced a huge improvement in my physical health.
Yeah.
A lot of the inflammation and chronic fatigue symptoms
Digestion
and
problems.
digestive issues have cleared up because I'm no longer holding this tension that was really about like, it's not okay to be yourself and it's not okay to want what you want and to feel what you feel. And so I've spoken about this in previous episodes. For a long time, I was living like a floating head. I wasn't in my own body. And as a result, I didn't feel connected physically to things like exercise or what I wanted to do with my body and how I wanted to be in the world and create and like wear certain clothes and literally living a more embodied life. So as you learn to feel safe to take up space and disappoint people, you also create the opportunity to be a more well-energized and wow factor version of you.
Yeah, for me, the benefits of taking up more space and not abandoning myself has been not feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, like being able to let go of those burdens that were not even mine to hold on to, but for whatever reason, I took them on board as my own. And also, my creative expression has skyrocketed. Like in the way I show up in life, the way I talk, the way I'm able to just express myself authentically with no judgment of myself or not really caring how other people are going to perceive me. Like I'm not looking for external validation. I'm showing up and I'm being me because it feels good to be me and I feel free within that. So that I've noticed that a lot. And then there's this sense of deeper connection to you through when I'm doing me and I'm giving myself permission to play a big game in life and I'm going all the way in, I feel more connected to you. And when you're doing that, I feel more connected to you too. But when we're both playing small and we're abandoning ourselves, we lose the sense of inspiration and life force and connection and creative potential. So by reclaiming my power, I've been able to reclaim all of that and then start to co-create the life I truly desire by not focusing on what I'm letting go of, but by focusing on what we can let in more of. And that's been a beautiful practice. And life can just become so amazing. And when you regain your power from the places you lost it, where you willingly gave it away, when that's something that you weren't aware of, you know, what you were doing in the moment, then you recognize it and then you shift that behavior, then your life does radically change and it's for the better. So this is all about your own personal development. This is all about your growth. And ultimately, it's not just about you. It's about being a permission slip for others to step into their authentic power too.
Yeah, the world is a much easier, more simple, vibrant, fun place to be when everyone is taking care of themselves
Mm,
and available to express their unique gifts in the world.
mm,
I think sometimes as highly sensitive empaths or codependent kind of people, we can actually get into this unhealthy hero savior complex mindset where we think it's up to us, and it's
mm,
not up to any one of us.
mm,
The world gets better by everyone working on themselves and taking responsibility. And the truth is, not everyone's ready, and that is okay.
mm.
So, a little word of wisdom that has helped me a lot that I hope someone will benefit from hearing is, if you've been carrying a burden of thinking that you need to make someone change in order for you to feel okay,
Mm.
it might be time to drop that. Focus on your own healing, focus on your own well being, lead by example, and let other people make their own choices.
Mm.
I have found that the people that I love and care about have been actually much more open to healing and changing when I stopped pressuring them
Mm.
and focused more on me. So it's a win-win-win.
So true. So, as this conversation comes to a completion, we want to remind you that a part of integrating what we've been speaking about is notice when you say yes to things that really are a no inside. Notice when you may be abandoning your own needs and desires to please others, and feel into it for yourself how that feels for you in your body. And if you're noticing that it doesn't feel aligned for you, then you have the power to make new decisions.
Yes, and as you discover more about yourself in this process, it is natural that it can be upsetting, triggering, frustrating. It can bring up all the feels.
Yeah.
So take your time with it. It's a journey. Keep showing up. And remember that today is a new day to lead from within.
Mm,
Instead of looking back and shaming and blaming your past or certain people in your life, what about just making today like a fresh canvas
mm.
and exploring how you want to be and what you want to prioritize, and then doing that and
Yeah.
seeing how it goes, seeing how it feels?
Yeah. Let us know in the comments what has supported you with this. Let us know. We would love to hear from you. Let's open up this conversation to inspire more people.
Let's be a permission slip for one another. Every single one of us that chooses to lead from within
Mm.
makes it a little more safe and a little more inspiring and a little more inviting for others to do the same.
Let's go.
Over and out.
Much
See
love.
you in the next episode.